So welcome everyone to the Power of Alignment, Mind, Body, and Purpose. We are so excited to be with you here globally and to eventually bring you here live. So I am Jenny Wise, the founder of Wise Mind Yoga, Science, and Soul. And I have my master's degree in health science. I've spent tons and tons of hours of studying yoga psychology and lots of other things, 2 years traveling to Los Angeles. But the biggest thing that's most important for what we're going to talk about today is that I am a recovering perfectionist. I'm a recovering workaholic, I'm a recovering stressaholic, and I'm a recovering what we call emotion mindaholic. And I have transformed a pattern of a very loud inner critic voice, okay? So we'll talk more about the inner critic later. And my journey is going on 8 years since 2013 of burnout from being in a corporate environment and not having the stress resilience skills that I have today that we're going to talk a little bit about. So in these uncertain times, self-care is so important, and self-care is not selfish. I've been talking about this for years, that we can come out of this stronger than when we came into this, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And we can actually prevent and help ourselves from not going into anxiety, not going into depression, not going into a place of overwhelm or panic or even being stuck, right? We can actually get ourselves out of being stuck. And we need leaders today more than ever in this pandemic, especially women. So you may be feeling burned out right now. You might be feeling stuck. So you can raise your hand here if you're feeling that way. So I want you to think about, and the ladies here are raising their hands. So I want us to think about as women rising up as women so that we can step into what we call intergenerational healing. And now is an amazing time to be able to align your purpose, to be able to figure out if you're a mom, if you're a mom boss, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, if you're a college student, if you're a high school student, if you are a corporate professional, if you have a side hustle. This applies to everyone right now because we need as many people as possible right now. And we want to be able to inspire and teach you how to align your mind, your body, your soul, and your purpose. How do you do that? How do you become the best version of yourself, and how do you step into that leadership role that you are meant to step into? So in order for us to do that, though, we have to let go of the past. We have to be able to live in the present so we can move into the future of who we are supposed to be. So this power of alignment, we're going to take your power back, right? We're going to teach you the neuroscience of change. I want you to think about your dharma, which is what we call your purpose in yoga, your destiny, and your dreams. Another way of saying this is your karma is your dharma, your mess is your message, and your wounds are your wisdom. So over the past 5 years, we've worked with going on 4,000 women that have come to groups that we've taught, have come to seminars, have come through yoga teacher training, have been private clients, have been a mastermind, in our mastermind. And what we have seen, the top 5 challenges that hold most women back, number 1 is exhaustion, burnout, and stress. So teaching ourselves what we call a stress resilience toolkit, mindfulness and meditation and yoga psychology skills, and what we call cope-ahead skills and self-care skills, so that we stay in a place of grounding and we don't get to that place of overwhelm. We don't burn out our nervous system. We don't burn out ourselves mentally, emotionally, or physically, because as women, we have a very difficult time staying in balance, right? So especially if we are type A personalities, perfectionists, or overachievers, right? And I'm raising my hand. So number 2, biggest challenge that we see women have is self-doubt and comparison, okay? So learning to let go of that inner critic voice of comparing ourselves to other women, right? And that there is actual neuroscience to be able to change this pattern of the inner critic voice. So that voice that we tell ourselves, that voice of doubt, and that comparison is actually the thief of joy, right? So there is no one else like you, right? We are 100% unique, and you really can't compare yourself to anyone else, because we are 100% uniquely made, and our journeys are each unique, right? So we can't, once you start understanding that, it'll make it easier for you to get out of that comparison kind of rat race. Number 3 challenge is limiting beliefs. And I'm going to talk more about this later, okay? So these are the unconscious patterns that prevent you from achieving your dharma, achieving your dreams, achieving your destiny, and we can learn to change those as well. Number 4, probably the biggest one, is perfectionism. So I mentioned, right, raise your hand, recovering perfectionist right here. I'm here to tell you on the other side of the work that I've done that you can change that pattern. And perfectionism is an illusion. It's a hustle. There is no such thing as perfect. There is good enough. There is doing the best that you can at that particular time, but there is no perfect. Number 5 is our passion, our purpose, our unique gifts. Being able to connect and align and attune to those gifts, right? So that's what we're going to talk about more, is learning how to have that strategy, but also connect with your heart and soul, right? So something that is coming that is heart-centered, that is coming from the soul, and you're listening to your intuition, you're listening to your gut instinct, and you're connecting to your gifts, and then you're going to be able to execute that and put it out into the world. So there's something called the hero's journey, the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is, I'm going to kind of talk about it in a three-step process. I can get into more detail, but I'm going to do the short version. The first one is the call to action. Okay, so this is where the hero answers the call. So something happens, they have some kind of awakening that happens, right? So maybe it's a health diagnosis, maybe it's losing your job. Usually it's something along those lines that awakens the hero that something needs to change. The next step is the transformation, where usually a mentor or someone comes into the picture that is meant to help you get through that transformation and that change. And oftentimes there's going to be challenges, COVID. There's going to be other things that are going to happen in that transformation, okay? And then the third step is returning home. That's the full circle of the transformation. And so I love to think about like answering the call, right? Like, so are you hearing the call, but are you answering the call? And part of that transformation is what we call stepping into the next threshold of initiation. So you can imagine there's like a line in the sand, and you're stepping into that next threshold of initiation. So what does that next version of yourself look like, right? What is that next version of your purpose? What does that look like for you? And stepping into that. So the first area I want to talk a little about is, how do you align to your purpose, right? How do you align to your story and what we call heal and rise to the best version of yourself? Remember that, rising up. So we align to our purpose through tools like yoga, the physical practice of yoga, meditation, breath work, what we call pranayama, prayer if that's in your practice, mindfulness, right? So that we have to be able to still the mind and move the body. So when we move the body, we start to align to our purpose and our soul and our mind. When we meditate and pray, we still the mind, because we can't really understand or tune into our intuition or our gifts or our purpose if our mind is moving too quickly. Okay, if we slow the mind, then we can tune into our intuition. So, our minds are running fast right now, Many of us, our bodies and minds are stressed, especially during this time. Our soul is not in peace, and so we can't really connect to our purpose or being able to execute on our next right step. So once you align to that purpose, how do you actually execute it? How do you actually put it out into the world? So, based on your belief system, you can call this the universe, you can call this a higher power, you can call this God, whatever you choose to call it. We're aligning to a higher purpose, right? And it's your dharma, is what they call it in yoga. What is your dharma? And your dharma actually transforms as you transform. It will shift and change as you step through that next threshold of initiation, right? So thinking about what is your unique story and what is your unique gifts. So who needs to hear your voice right now and using your voice and speaking your truth, right? So kind of letting go of fear and stepping into faith, which again is not an easy thing, right? We're letting go of fear and we're stepping into love because we each have something unique. We each have a unique story to tell. It's stepping in and tapping into what that looks like and letting go of the imposter syndrome, which is the inner critic, and letting go of the inner critic of telling yourself, who do you think you are? Like, if I hadn't done the work that I did to be standing here right now, I would be letting my inner critic tell me, who do you think you are, to stand up here and talk about this. So again, we're stepping into that next threshold of initiation in the hero's journey, and we're showing up 100% as our authentic self with no judgment. So I'm almost there. So people will judge you no matter what, okay? People are gonna judge you no matter what. So you might as well show up in service as a servant leader in alignment with your purpose and learn not to judge yourself, right? So this is the biggest shift that I think most of us can make right now, is letting go of those patterns like the perfectionism and letting go of the inner critic voice and really learning to accept ourselves and to love ourselves 100%. So asking yourself this, do you speak to yourself like you speak to a friend? How do you speak to yourself? Okay. Are you kinder to others than you are to yourself? Do you struggle with accepting and supporting yourself, loving yourself? Could you maybe use more self-compassion, right? So this is something called mindful self-compassion. Some of you might have heard this term before. So it's one thing to kind of learn the term and teach the term. It's another thing to embody the term and to live and practice that mindful self-compassion, right? So it's a practice, right? Just like yoga is a practice and meditation is a practice, mindfulness is a practice, mindful self-compassion is a practice. So we want to kind of learn some of these principles around mindfulness. One of them is letting it go and letting it be, okay? Letting go of expectations of ourselves and others. There's that perfectionism again. And letting go of what's not in our control. And non-judgment. So non-judgment is probably one of the biggest key components of mindfulness and yoga, is learning to not judge ourselves. And when that happens, we naturally start to shift our lens of how we see everybody else around us, because guess what happens? The more we love ourselves and the more compassion we have for ourselves, the more we have to give to everybody else around us. And your lens changes and how you see other people. You naturally become less judgmental, more compassionate, more loving. So that's an amazing side effect to that. I want you to think about letting go of your shoulds, okay? So trying to reduce the amount of times you tell yourself, I should do this, I could have done that. I call this shoulding on yourself, okay? I did say shoulding. So taking, like maybe just being aware of it and reducing how often you say that to yourself, okay? So number 2 that I wanted to focus on is becoming a a leader, your best leader, and aligning to your purpose is becoming vulnerable, becoming a transparent leader that has discernment, but also someone who is strong, because I am all about female empowerment, but I'm also at the same time about balancing surrender, right? So the word surrender is definitely a word that has come up for me during this whole pandemic, that we have to show up and we have to be super strong, but we also can surrender and we don't have to do it all by ourselves, okay? So again, the more we learn to love and accept ourselves and practice this consistent mindful self-compassion, the more we can also connect to our soul and our higher self, right? So our soul, right, is who we really are in our authentic self, who we are in our core being. And we also learn to start to heal our hearts, right? And that's part of this process too, is we actually start to heal our hearts and our minds so that we can show up with more vulnerability. Because again, the more we heal ourselves, the more open and vulnerable and transparent we can be with other people, because we're not trying to shield ourselves from the wounds that we have. Those are already healed. And so we're naturally able to be more open and vulnerable. So I want to read you a quote. This is from Theodore Roosevelt. And this is called, we renamed it, The Woman in the Arena. Okay, so I'm going to read this part. So it is not the critic who counts, but the woman who points out how the strong woman stumbles, or not the woman who points out how the strong woman stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotion, who spends herself in a worthy cause, who at the best, in the end, the triumph of high achievement, and at the worst, if she fails, at least she fails daring greatly. So that her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither knew defeat nor victory. So this is a great example of stepping into the threshold of initiation in that hero's journey, of letting go of the judgment of other people, that again, people are going to judge you no matter what you do. So you might as well show up in your full purpose and do your thing and do you, right? Because people are going to judge you no matter what. So that quote was actually the inspiration for Brene Brown's Daring Greatly book, was that quote. And that is what her Daring Greatly book is based on, because she actually did a TED Talk years ago, and she had a bunch of people criticize her online and do all kinds of things. And based on that trial that she went through, she was inspired to then write another book that was called Daring Greatly. And then she showed up and she did a Netflix, a bigger presentation, right? So that's just an example of kind of going through trials and being able to grow through those trials. And this is probably one of the biggest examples that we'll ever have in our life of a trial that we're going through. Okay? So number 3 is learn to accept yourself, what we call a judgment detox. Okay, a judgment detox. So this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the inner critic and self-love. So we're letting go of patterns and programming and limiting beliefs that are not serving you. So this is where the neuroscience of change comes in, because our mind has a negative bias, right? Our mind is there to protect us from stepping into things that are new or stepping into growth. Our brain is there to protect us. So we teach this in our Wise Mind Yoga Science Soul Mastermind group coaching about how to step into that, how to step into the highest version of yourself and take your power back. So let me tell you what the inner critic is. I'm going to give you the short definition. The inner critic is that internal judge and jury that you have, right? It's that what we call your inner mean girl that is telling you negative things all day long. It's that negative thought loop that you get into. And it tells you things like, I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I should give up. I should be over this by now. I shouldn't be having these feelings. I'm fat. I'm ugly. No one likes me. I'm stupid. I'll never succeed. I'm lazy. I don't do enough. I'm useless. I'm weak. I'm